I'm Callista Jennings, 29, and at our family's annual reunion, my father raised his glass, silenced the room, and announced, "To everyone here, let it be known that in our eyes, Callista is already dead." My mother nodded in agreement. 300 guests witnessed my family execution because I fell in love with the wrong man. That night, I lost my family, my home, my career, everything. What I didn't know was that their public cruelty would ultimately set me free and bring the justice no one saw coming. Hey there, I see you've made it to my story. Before we dive in, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments. If my family drama has caught your interest so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to join me for more shocking real-life stories about family betrayal and the sweet justice that sometimes follows. Now let's rewind to understand how my perfect daughter facade crumbled in a single night. Growing up as a Jennings meant excellence wasn't a goal, it was the baseline. My father, Richard Jennings, built Jennings Pharmaceuticals from a small research lab into a Fortune 500 company over 30 years. Our Georgian colonial in Greenwich, Connecticut, with its manicured gardens and infinity pool overlooking the Sound, was the perfect setting for a seemingly perfect family. Mediocrity is for people without ambition, Callista, my father would say, whenever I brought home anything less than an A+. Even my mother Eleanor, with her perfectly highlighted hair and country club smile, would look disappointed if I placed second in debate tournaments or piano recitals. "Jennings women don't come second, darling," she'd remind me while sipping her afternoon martini. By 16, I had learned the unspoken rule: love in our family was conditional, measured in achievements and appearances. I maintained a 4 gigapascals, captained the tennis team, volunteered at the right charities, and dated boys from suitable families. But beneath the polished exterior, a different Callista existed, one who sketched environmental landscapes in hidden notebooks and dreamed of environmental law, not pharmaceutical boardrooms. My younger brother Noah had it worse. Where I excelled at meeting expectations, Noah struggled. His dyslexia went undiagnosed for years because our parents refused to acknowledge weakness. By high school, he self-medicated with alcohol and eventually harder substances. Yet, at family functions, my parents expertly spun tales of Noah's gap year or his entrepreneurial spirit needing time to develop. In reality, they were covering up rehab stays and failed college attempts while still throwing money at his problems. "Why do they make excuses for him but expect perfection from you?" my college roommate once asked. "Because I can give them what they want," I replied. "Noah can't." After graduating from Yale Law, I surprised no one by accepting a position at Jennings Pharmaceuticals' legal department, abandoning my dream of environmental law. The golden handcuffs were comfortable executive suite with a view 6-figure salary approval in my father's eyes. I became the company's youngest ever legal affairs director at 27, with my face on industry magazines and my calendar full of networking events. It was at one such event, the annual Pharmaceutical Innovation Gala, that I met Marcus Sinclair. He stood alone by the champagne fountain, looking as uncomfortable in his tuxedo as I felt in my designer gown. "These things are theatrical performances, aren't they?" he said when I approached. Everyone playing their assigned roles. His honesty was refreshing. By midnight, we were sitting on the venue's rooftop shoes off sharing life stories. Marcus was brilliant, an environmental scientist working on sustainable packaging solutions for pharmaceutical products. He understood my abandoned passion instantly. "Why didn't you pursue it?" he asked. "Family expectations create gravity," I replied. "The further you try to go from them, the stronger they pull you back." We began dating secretly. For 3 months, Marcus became my escape weekend hikes in the Berkshires, impromptu jazz clubs in Manhattan, cooking dinners in his modest Brooklyn apartment. He never asked about my family wealth or connections. With him, I was just Callista, not the Jennings heiress, not the pharmaceutical executive. One evening, as we lay on his sofa, I scrolled through industry news on my phone and froze. The headline read, "Sinclair Biosolutions wins, preliminary injunction against Jennings Pharmaceuticals." The accompanying photo showed Marcus's father, Douglas Sinclair, outside a courthouse. "Your last name is Sinclair," I whispered. "As in Sinclair Biosolutions?" Marcus sat up slowly. "And you're a Jennings." "From Jennings Pharmaceuticals." The silence between us stretched as the implications settled in. Our families had been locked in bitter rivalry for nearly 20 years, competing products, patent disputes, and currently, a massive lawsuit over water contamination near one of our manufacturing plants. Sinclair Biosolutions, with their focus on environmental sustainability, had been a thorn in my father's profit-driven side for decades. "Does it matter?" Marcus finally asked. His expression was guarded but hopeful. "It shouldn't," I replied, though we both knew it would. We agreed to continue seeing each other, deciding that at the upcoming annual Jennings family reunion, I would introduce Marcus properly. It was time to stop living two separate lives. "They'll come around once they see how happy we are," I told Marcus, with far more confidence than I felt. Besides, I'm almost 30, too old to let my parents dictate my personal life. Marcus squeezed my hand but remained quiet. Later I would remember that silence and recognize it for what it was, the sound of someone who knew better than I did what was coming. "Maybe we should wait," Marcus suggested as the reunion date approached. "Give it a few more months." "No," I insisted. "I'm tired of compartmentalizing my life to please them. It's time they see the real me. If only I had listened to his concerns. If only I had understood then that in the Jennings family authenticity was never valued as highly as allegiance." The annual Jennings family reunion was less a family gathering and more a corporate showcase. Held each summer at our family's estate, it combined the pretension of a high society gala with the strategic networking of a business conference. Extended family business associates and carefully selected friends gathered to celebrate the Jennings legacy and remind everyone of our continued success. This year, staff had transformed our backyard into a white-tented wonderland with crystal chandeliers suspended from ceiling drapes, ice sculptures of the company logo, and string quartet playing near the rose garden. Waiters circulated with champagne and canapes, while bartenders mixed signature cocktails named after our top-selling pharmaceuticals. "Your mother has outdone herself, my cousin," Melanie whispered, as we watched Eleanor directing staff with military precision. "Though I think naming drinks after antidepressants is a bit on the nose." I laughed nervously, scanning the growing crowd for Marcus. We had agreed to arrive separately, me already on site, helping with preparations, him arriving fashionably late to minimize pre-introduction awkwardness. My stomach twisted with each passing minute. "You look like you're about to face a firing squad." Noah appeared beside me, remarkably sober for this early in the evening. "What gives I've invited someone important to me?" Noah raised an eyebrow. "Someone Dad won't approve of. This should liven things up. If only he knew how prophetic those words would be." Marcus arrived precisely at 7, looking polished in a navy suit that highlighted his broad shoulders. From across the lawn, our eyes met, and his warm smile temporarily calmed my nerves. I excused myself from a conversation with my father's golf partners and made my way toward him. "You came," I said, reaching for his hand. I said I would. His fingers intertwined with mine, steadying and warm. Though I'm still not convinced this is a good idea. "It's the right time," I insisted. "Let me introduce you to my Aunt Patricia. First, she's the reasonable one. We never made it to Aunt Patricia." Halfway across the lawn, Sophia Chen, a journalist from Pharmaceutical Weekly who my father had invited for positive press coverage, intercepted us. Callista Jennings. Her voice carried just a bit too loudly. And wait, Marcus Sinclair, of Sinclair Biosolutions heads, turned in our direction. The string quartet seemed to falter mid-note. Miss Chen, I nodded politely, feeling Marcus stiffen beside me. Yes, this is Marcus Sinclair, my guest this evening. Fascinating. Sophia's eyes gleamed with the look journalists get when stumbling upon an unexpected story. Does your father know you've brought a Sinclair to the family gathering, especially with the water contamination lawsuit in progress? Before I could respond, I felt my father's presence behind me. The subtle scent of his sandalwood, cologne arriving a moment before his voice. What water contamination lawsuit? His tone was deceptively pleasant, for the benefit of onlookers. Oh, you must mean the frivolous claim being pursued by opportunists looking for a payout. He extended his hand to Marcus with the cold smile I'd seen him use on competitors before destroying them. And you are Dad, I interjected. This is Marcus Sinclair. Marcus, my father, Richard Jennings. The silence that followed was absolute. My father's outstretched hand slowly withdrew. Sinclair, he repeated. Douglas Sinclair's son. Yes, sir. Marcus acknowledged, maintaining eye contact with admirable composure. My father's expression hardened to granite. And you're here because... I invited him, I said firmly. We've been seeing each other for 3 months. I see. 2 words carrying a millennium of cold fury. Callista, a word. Privately, anything you have to say can be said here, I replied, squeezing Marcus's hand tighter. I'm not ashamed of our relationship. By now, a small crowd had gathered at a barely polite distance, pretending not to listen while catching every word. My mother materialized at my father's side, her social smile firmly in place, though her eyes had turned to ice. Perhaps we should continue this discussion in your father's study, she suggested, voice honey-coated, but unmistakably commanding. No, I said, surprised by my own defiance. I'm tired of private family discussions and public pretenses. Marcus is important to me, and I won't pretend otherwise to maintain appearances. My father's face flushed dangerously. You've been secretly consorting with the son of a man who's actively trying to destroy our company, a man who's built his entire business model on criticizing our practices. Marcus isn't his father, and maybe if you listened to some of Sinclair's criticisms instead of fighting them, we wouldn't be facing lawsuits about contaminating water supplies. Gasps rippled through our audience. My mother's smile vanished completely. You would side with them over your own family. My father's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. After everything we've given you, your position, your lifestyle, your future, all provided by the company, you're now disparaging in public. I'm not siding against family. I'm refusing to let a corporate rivalry dictate my personal life. I tried to explain, my voice beginning to shake. If you just talk to Marcus, get to know him. Enough. My father rarely raised his voice. When he did, it commanded complete attention. He looked around at the gathered crowd, then back at me with such cold disappointment that I physically flinched. Ladies and gentlemen, family and friends, he began raising his voice to address the entire party. I had planned to announce Callista's promotion to executive vice president this evening. Instead, I find myself making a different announcement. My stomach dropped. Marcus attempted to pull me away, but I stood frozen. The Jennings name represents integrity, loyalty, and commitment to values. It appears my daughter no longer shares these qualities. He looked directly at me. As of this moment, Callista is no longer welcome in Jennings Pharmaceuticals or the Jennings family. Her position is terminated, her trust fund revoked, and her name, my name, is no longer hers to use for advancement. The crowd's murmuring grew louder. Someone gasped. Aunt Patricia stepped forward but was silenced by my mother's glare. Richard, my mother said loudly enough for all to hear, are you certain this is necessary? It was theater, I realized. They had performed this good cop divided by bad cop routine my entire life. Entirely necessary, Eleanor, my father replied. Betrayal of family cannot be tolerated. He turned back to me, eyes cold. To everyone present, let it be known that in our eyes, Callista is already dead." My mother nodded solemnly. "We have no daughter." The words hit me like physical blows. Through tears, I saw my brother Noah step forward, mouth open to speak, but our father's hand on his shoulder stopped him. "You have 30 minutes to collect essential items from your room," my father continued clinically. "The rest will be packed and sent to wherever you choose to go with him." He gestured dismissively toward Marcus. "This is insane." Marcus finally spoke, his arm protective around my shoulders. "You would disown your daughter over who she dates." "This isn't about dating," my father replied coldly. "This is about loyalty. Something you Sinclairs know nothing about." As Marcus led me away from the stunned crowd, I heard the whispers begin, the familiar sound of family gossip, sharpening its knives. My cousin Melanie already had her phone out, no doubt spreading the news. My mother had turned to the catering manager, calmly discussing a change to the evening's toast. My father was shaking hands with a business associate, smiling as if nothing had happened. Only Noah looked devastated, his eyes following me until I disappeared into the house. Only Aunt Patricia made a move to follow us before being intercepted by my mother. Upstairs in my childhood bedroom, I moved mechanically, filling a suitcase with essential items, while Marcus stood guard at the door. "I'm so sorry," he kept saying. "I knew this would happen. We should have waited." "No," I replied, voice hollow. "This would have happened eventually. Better to know now who they really are." I looked around at the room's perfect decor, the photos of achievements lining the walls, the trophies and awards. None of this was ever really about me. It was always about them. 28 minutes later, we walked out the front door. No one came to say goodbye. My keycard to the house no longer worked when I tested it, confirming the speed with which I had been erased. As Marcus drove us away from the only home I'd ever known, I watched the lights of the party growing smaller in the side mirror. Music and laughter continued uninterrupted, the Jennings family reunion proceeding smoothly despite having just lost a family member. Or perhaps I thought numbly because of it. The full magnitude of being disowned didn't hit me until the following Monday. My apartment key no longer worked. The luxury condo had been company housing. My company email returned error messages. My credit cards were declined when I tried to book a hotel room. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications, mostly gossip columns and industry newsletters reporting variations of Jennings, heiress ousted over rivalry romance. "Stay with me," Marcus offered that first night, as we sat in his car outside my inaccessible apartment building. "At least until you figure things out." Marcus's Brooklyn one-bedroom became my refugee camp. He cleared half his closet and a drawer for the pitiful collection of clothes and personal items I'd managed to grab. My designer suits and cocktail dresses looked absurdly out of place hanging beside his practical everyday wear. "I should have warned you better about what they're capable of," I said on our third night together, staring at the ceiling. I knew and still somehow didn't believe they'd go this far. "You couldn't have known," Marcus replied, though we both recognized the lie. I had known somewhere deep down. I just never thought I'd be on the receiving end of the Jennings scorched earth policy. A week later, escorted by building security, I cleared out my office at Jennings Pharmaceuticals headquarters. My father had arranged to be out of the country. My former colleagues averted their eyes as I carried a cardboard box to the elevator, 3 years of professional life reduced to a few personal items. In my desk drawer, I found a USB drive I didn't recognize. Late that night, while Marcus slept, I plugged it into my laptop and discovered a trove of internal documents, environmental impact reports, internal memos discussing chemical disposal procedures, emails between executives about acceptable risk, the margins in communities near manufacturing plants, documents that directly contradicted the company's public statements about the very water contamination issue at the center of the Sinclair lawsuit. I didn't know who had placed the drive in my desk or why, but its contents made one thing clear. My family's company wasn't just fighting Sinclair Biosolutions. They were actively covering up legitimate environmental concerns. The discovery should have vindicated. Marcus should have brought us closer. Instead, it drove the first wedge between us. "You should take this to my father," Marcus suggested when I showed him the files. "This could help our case." "I can't just hand over confidential company documents," I protested. "That would be corporate espionage, regardless of what they contain." "So you're still protecting them? After everything I'm protecting myself, using these documents could be legally problematic for me." This argument replayed with variations over subsequent weeks. Meanwhile, my parents' campaign against me expanded beyond financial strangulation. Colleagues who initially expressed sympathy stopped returning my calls. Recruiters who had once eagerly pursued me suddenly had no suitable positions. Former friends canceled plans with transparent excuses. "They're blackballing you," Marcus concluded after my fifth rejection from law firms that had previously tried to poach me. "Your parents are making sure no one in the industry will touch you." I knew he was right. Richard Jennings's influence stretched throughout the pharmaceutical and legal communities like an invisible web. One call from him could close doors without explanation. 2 weeks after the disownment, Noah texted me. "They're monitoring my phone, but wanted you to know I'm thinking of you. Don't try to contact me." They've gone nuclear. Even that small contact provided momentary comfort, at least until I saw my brother quoted in an industry publication saying, "My sister made choices that unfortunately proved incompatible with our family values." The statement reeked of my father's phrasing. I imagined Noah reciting it under dictation, another puppet with Jennings strings. The only genuine support came unexpectedly from Aunt Patricia. My mother's sister had always been the family rebel, divorced twice, running a small art gallery rather than working for the family business, openly disdainful of what she called the Jennings obsession with dynasty. "Meet me at Riverside Park by the 79th Street boat basin." Wednesday, 2 p.m. read her text from an unfamiliar number. "Don't tell anyone." Patricia arrived wearing oversized sunglasses and a scarf covering her distinctive red hair. "Your mother doesn't know I'm here," she explained, handing me an envelope. "It's not much, but it should help until you get back on your feet." The envelope contained $5, 0 inches cash, and a key to a small apartment in Queens. "It's a walk-up above the gallery annex," Patricia explained. "Not what you're used to, but it's paid through the end of the year." "Why are you helping me?" I asked, stunned by her generosity. "Because what they did was wrong," she replied simply. "And because 30 years ago I fell in love with someone the family disapproved of too. I chose the family over her, and it was the greatest mistake of my life." Her revelation, both the help and the casual disclosure of sexuality my mother had never mentioned, left me reeling. "They'll cut you off if they find out you're helping me," I warned. Patricia smiled sadly. "Honey, I've been the family disappointment for decades. I just hide it better than you did." The apartment above Patricia's gallery became my first independent home. Tiny with unreliable plumbing and neighbors who cooked pungent meals at all hours, it was worlds away from my former life. I supplemented Patricia's generosity by selling my designer clothes and accessories through consignment shops, each sale a symbolic severing of ties to my past identity. I applied for positions at environmental nonprofits, my abandoned passion resurfacing amid the wreckage of my former life. The pay was a fraction of my previous salary, but the rejections hurt more than the prospect of financial downgrade. Meanwhile, my relationship with Marcus deteriorated under the strain. The romantic fantasy of defying our families together crumbled against practical realities. His parents, though less dramatic than mine, made their disapproval clear. Marcus began working late. Our conversations grew shorter, centered, increasingly around practicalities rather than connection. 6 weeks after the disownment, I was washing dishes in my tiny kitchen when a breaking news alert appeared on my phone. Richard Jennings addresses company restructuring. The accompanying video showed my father at a press conference. Jennings Pharmaceuticals has always valued integrity above all, he said, looking directly into the camera. Sometimes maintaining that integrity requires difficult decisions. Recently, we've had to cut toxic elements from both our corporate and personal spheres. While painful in the short term, removing these negative influences ultimately strengthens the whole. I hurled my phone across the room, shattering its screen against the wall. When Marcus came home and found me sobbing on the bathroom floor, we both knew something fundamental had broken both in me and between us. "I can't do this anymore," he said quietly, sitting beside me on the cold tiles. "Watch you destroy yourself over people who clearly don't deserve your grief." "Then don't," I replied, the words escaping before I could reconsider. "Nobody's forcing you to stay." The silence that followed contained the weight of everything unsaid between us. How my family's rejection had warped our relationship from something joyful into something burdened. How we'd both begun to question whether our connection was strong enough to survive outside the adrenaline-fueled drama of forbidden love. 2 days later, Marcus moved his essential items out of the Brooklyn apartment. We agreed he would continue paying rent until the lease ended, giving me time to find a more permanent solution. Our goodbye was gentle but final, two people acknowledging that, while they hadn't fallen out of love, the circumstances of their meeting had irreparably colored their future. "For what it's worth," Marcus said at the door, "I think you're incredibly brave. Not many people would have the courage to start over from scratch." After he left, I sat alone in the growing darkness, finally confronting the truth I'd been avoiding. I hadn't just lost my family and boyfriend, I'd lost my entire identity. For 29 years, I'd been Callista Jennings, daughter of Richard and Eleanor, heir to Jennings Pharmaceuticals, overachiever, perfect corporate attorney. Who was I without those labels? The answer, I realized, was both terrifying and liberating, whoever I chose to become. 6 months after being declared dead to my family, I stood at the window of my Queens apartment watching sunrise illuminate a neighborhood I'd never imagined calling home. The cramped one-bedroom walk-up above Aunt Patricia's gallery annex had gradually transformed from refugee housing to something resembling a home thrift store furniture, arranged with care walls adorned with student artwork from in the community class I taught on weekends, a collection of thriving plants lining the fire escape. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. First day, River Alliance, 8:30 a.m. After months of applications and rejections, I'd finally secured an entry-level position at the River Alliance, a small environmental nonprofit focused on water quality in the Northeast. The salary was barely enough to cover rent and groceries, but the work aligned with my abandoned passion for environmental law. My new business cards read simply, Callista J., the truncated surname, both practical protection and symbolic rebirth. "You look different," observed Aunt Patricia during our weekly coffee meeting the previous weekend. "Bad different?" I'd asked, self-consciously touching my newly cut hair, now falling in a practical bob instead of the expensive salon waves I'd maintained for years. "Real different," Patricia corrected, smiling. "Like you've finally taken off a mask you didn't know you were wearing." She was right. The external transformation, simpler clothes, minimal makeup, more practical hairstyle merely reflected the internal shifts. In therapy sessions I could barely afford but couldn't survive without, I was untangling the complex web of conditional love that had shaped my psyche, discovering that much of what I'd considered ambition had actually been desperate striving for parental approval. My relationship with Marcus had ended 2 months earlier. The initial passionate defiance that bonded us couldn't sustain a healthy relationship, especially as both of us struggled with our individual family dramas. "I think we were brought together for a reason," Marcus said during our final conversation. "But maybe that reason wasn't to stay together. Maybe it was to help each other break free." I still occasionally checked his social media, noting with bittersweet pride his growing profile in sustainable packaging innovation. His family's lawsuit against Jennings Pharmaceuticals continued moving through the courts with preliminary rulings favoring Sinclair's claims about water contamination. Each mention of the lawsuit triggered my ethical dilemma regarding the USB drive of damning internal documents still hidden in my apartment. The environmental lawyer in me knew this evidence should come to light. The daughter in me still hesitated to deliver the final blow to my family's company, despite their treatment of me. My first day at River Alliance brought unexpected clarity. Dr. Helena Ramirez, the organization's founder and director, outlined their current projects during orientation. Our biggest challenge is the industrial corridor along the Hudson, she explained, pointing to a map. 3 manufacturing facilities with documented violations, but enough money and political connections to delay consequences indefinitely. Her finger tapped a location I recognized instantly, Jennings Pharmaceuticals' largest manufacturing plant. This one's particularly problematic. Helena continued unaware of my connection. Their parent company has excellent PR and an army of lawyers that tie up every investigation in years of paperwork. Meanwhile, the contamination continues. Later that afternoon, back in my apartment, I stared at the USB drive in my palm. The universe seemed to be sending an unmistakable message. This wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about responsibility. I opened my laptop, finally examining the documents more thoroughly. Among the files was evidence that my father had personally ordered the alteration of environmental impact studies, authorized illegal chemical dumping to cut costs, and instructed legal teams to exploit regulatory loopholes. What struck me hardest wasn't the evidence itself, but realizing I wasn't surprised by it. The same ruthlessness my parents had shown in cutting me from their lives characterized their business practices, image, and profit above all else, regardless of who suffered. My phone rang, interrupting these dark thoughts, an unknown number. Callista. The voice was familiar but hesitant. It's Noah. My brother. My heart raced. Noah, are you okay? No, he admitted, voice cracking. I relapsed. Bad. Mom and Dad are covering it up again, telling everyone I'm at a leadership retreat. I can't do this anymore, Callie. I need real help. Hearing my childhood nickname broke something open inside me. Where are you? I'll come get you. They'll be furious if you get involved, he warned. I'm already dead to them. Remember, what more can they do? The next day, I drove a borrowed car to a roadside motel in Connecticut, where I found Noah, pale and shaking eyes hollow from days of substance abuse. Getting him admitted to a real rehabilitation center, not the discreet wellness spas my parents preferred, required using the last of my emergency funds. Watching him walk through those doors, determined but terrified, crystallized my decision about the USB drive. This wasn't just about environmental justice anymore. It was about breaking cycles of destruction, both environmental and familial. The following week, I contacted an attorney specializing in whistleblower cases. Her eyes widened as she reviewed the documents. This is comprehensive, she said carefully. You understand what releasing this will mean, not just for the company, but potentially for your father, personally, I nodded. I do, but continuing to hide it makes me complicit. You don't have to be the public face of this, she advised. We can work with regulatory authorities anonymously. No, I decided. I'm tired of hiding. And so began the next phase of my journey, working with the EPA and state environmental agencies to build a case while continuing my daily work at River Alliance. The investigation moved quietly, at first gathering momentum behind the scenes. I lived with constant anxiety about potential retaliation, but also growing certainty that I was finally living according to my true values. 3 months into the investigation, I encountered Marcus unexpectedly at an environmental conference in Boston. We spotted each other across the exhibition hall, both freezing momentarily before he approached. "How are you?" he asked, genuine concern in his eyes. "Building something new," I replied. "Different than before, but maybe better." "You?" "Similar journey," he smiled slightly. "My parents weren't thrilled when I declined the executive position they'd planned for me. I'm heading our sustainability research now instead." We found a quiet corner to talk, conversation flowing easier than expected. The painful intensity that characterized our breakup had mellowed into something gentler, mutual respect and understanding. "I heard about the investigation," he said eventually. "Rumors in the industry." "Is it true you're involved?" I nodded. "It's the right thing to do." "Be careful," he warned. "Your father won't go down without a fight." Marcus's warning proved prescient. The following week, Patricia called in a panic. "Someone's been asking questions about you at the gallery," a man claiming to be an old colleague. He was taking pictures of the building. Days later, my apartment was broken into nothing, taken but everything searched. The message was clear: I was being watched. Fortunately, the USB drive was secured in my attorney's office by then. As the investigation gathered momentum, I was forced to move twice more for safety. The River Alliance provided unexpected support, with colleagues offering couches and spare rooms when they learned fragments of my situation. For perhaps the first time, I experienced community based on genuine connection rather than obligation or advantage. In those difficult months, I discovered what real friendship looked like. People who showed up not because of my last name or what I could offer them, but simply because they cared. This chosen family sustained me through the darkening storm as my parents' counterattack grew more aggressive. Hey everyone, I know we're at a critical point in the story, but if you're feeling invested in what happens next, please hit that like button. I've been overwhelmed by your supportive comments so far. If you want to see more stories about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard, make sure you're subscribed. Now let's see how this family drama unfolds when the investigation goes public. 1 year after being publicly disowned, I sat across from federal investigators watching them review evidence that would fundamentally change Jennings Pharmaceuticals forever. These internal communications clearly show knowledge of contamination dating back 7 years, noted the lead investigator, a stern woman named Director Morrison. And these executive memos demonstrate deliberate concealment from regulatory agencies. The altered environmental impact reports are particularly damning, added her colleague. We can prove these originated from executive-level directives. My whistleblower attorney squeezed my hand under the table, both in support and warning. We'd prepared extensively for this meeting, knowing it represented a point of no return. Once these documents entered official channels, there would be no containing the investigation. "Miss Jennings, excuse me, Miss J?" Director Morrison addressed me directly. "You understand you may be called to testify if this proceeds to criminal charges?" "I do," I confirmed, "and I'm prepared to do so." Walking out of the federal building that afternoon, I felt oddly lightweight, as if surrendering the documents had physically unburdened me. The heavy secret I'd carried for months was now in appropriate hands. Whatever happened next was beyond my control. That evening, I received another call from Noah, now 6 months sober and living in a halfway house in Vermont. "The investigators contacted me," he said without preamble. "They want to know about Dad's record-keeping practices, who had access to environmental compliance reports." "You don't have to get involved," I assured him, worried about his still fragile recovery. "Actually, I think I do," Noah replied, his voice stronger than I'd heard in years. "I've been enabling their behavior my whole life by staying silent, just like they enabled mine." We talked for hours that night, sharing parallel journeys of breaking free from toxic family patterns. Noah had finally received proper treatment for his dyslexia and underlying anxiety disorder. Without the crushing weight of unattainable family expectations, he was discovering his own strengths. a natural talent for working with troubled teens, emerging leadership in his recovery community. Dad showed up at rehab last month, Noah revealed. Tried to convince me to leave, said he'd set me up with a private treatment specialist who would be more discreet. What did you do? I asked, holding my breath. I told him I was staying. That real recovery isn't about appearances. Noah paused. He said I was making a mistake just like you did. That was the moment I realized he will never change. The investigation proceeded methodically over subsequent months. Occasionally, industry publications would mention regulatory inquiries at Jennings Pharmaceuticals, but the full scope remained confidential. I continued my work at River Alliance, gradually earning promotions based on merit rather than nepotism, finding deep satisfaction in projects that created tangible environmental improvements. 8 months into the investigation, I received an unexpected visitor at the River Alliance office, Aunt Patricia, looking uncharacteristically worried. Your mother contacted me, she said, once we'd found privacy in a nearby coffee shop. She wants to meet. My stomach clenched. Why now? She wouldn't say exactly, but reading between the lines, I think they know about the investigation. They're trying to determine your involvement. Are you here to convince me to meet her? I asked cautiously. Patricia shook her head. I'm here to warn you. Eleanor isn't reaching out from maternal love, she's on a reconnaissance mission. Richard is absolutely furious about the investigation. He suspects you but can't prove it yet. How bad is it? Bad enough that your mother is willing to break their "you're dead to us" stance, Patricia replied grimly, which means they're desperate. I declined the meeting request through Patricia, who reported back that Eleanor was deeply disappointed in my continued hostility. The irony might have been amusing if the stakes weren't so high. Weeks later, while presenting at a small environmental conference in Philadelphia, I spotted Marcus in the audience. He approached afterward, professional but warm. Impressive presentation, he offered. Your community water monitoring program is exactly what's needed. Something had shifted in him, a new confidence, less of the tension he'd carried during our relationship. We had dinner that evening, conversation flowing more easily than expected. My father stepped down as CEO, Marcus explained over dessert. Heart health issues, he says, but really, it was the stress of multiple lawsuits. I've been implementing sustainable practices throughout our operations since taking over R&D. You always wanted to change things from within, I acknowledged. Looks like you're succeeding. And you're changing things from without, he observed. Different approaches, same goal. That dinner led to occasional text messages, then regular phone calls. Our reconnection evolved slowly, built on more solid foundation than our initial passionate but ultimately unsustainable relationship. We were different people now, both more grounded in our authentic selves, less defined by family legacies. I'm testifying next month, I confided during one late-night call. The investigation is moving to formal hearings. Are you scared? Marcus asked. Terrified, I admitted. But also ready. For what it's worth, I think you're the bravest person I know, he said softly. As the federal investigation intensified, my parents launched their counteroffensive. Industry contacts reported Richard pulling every string, calling in favors, attempting to discredit the investigation as politically motivated. Pharmaceutical blogs began running thinly veiled hit pieces, questioning my mental stability and suggesting personal vendetta motivated any allegations. The most painful attack came in the form of a concerned interview my mother gave to a sympathetic journalist, describing how the family had tried everything to help their troubled daughter before her unfortunate estrangement. She painted a picture of a jealous, unstable young woman who had always struggled with her brother's special place in the family. Noah responded with his own public statement, his first act of open defiance. In a LinkedIn post that quickly went viral throughout the industry, he wrote, "As the brother referenced in recent media coverage about Jennings Pharmaceuticals, I feel compelled to speak my truth. My sister Callista was never jealous or troubled. She was the family's greatest strength, sacrificing her own dreams to meet impossible expectations. Her current actions reflect her lifelong integrity, not revenge. I stand with her completely. The post was shared thousands of times before my parents' legal team could pressure Noah to remove it. By then, the damage to their carefully constructed narrative was done. 2 weeks before scheduled testimony, I received an unexpected message from Marcus. Check your email. Urgent. The forwarded email contained internal Sinclair Biosolutions documentation suggesting they had known about certain aspects of the Jennings contamination but had potentially exaggerated others for competitive advantage. I found these while reviewing historical case files, Marcus wrote. I thought you should know everything before testifying. Our company isn't blameless either. His willingness to share potentially damaging information about his own family company simply because it was the right thing to do spoke volumes about his character. In that moment, I recognized that our reconnection might have deeper potential than I'd allowed myself to consider. The night before my scheduled testimony, as I reviewed notes in my apartment, a knock came at my door. Through the peephole, I saw the last person I expected, my father. Heart pounding, I called my attorney and put her on speaker before opening the door. Richard Jennings had aged a decade in the 18 months since disowning me. His imposing presence had diminished shoulders, slightly stooped new lines etched deeply around his mouth. Callista, he acknowledged, voice lacking its usual commanding tone. May I come in? Against my attorney's whispered advice, I stepped aside, allowing him into my modest apartment. His gaze swept the small space lingering on my law school diploma, the only item I'd retrieved from my former office that directly connected to him as he'd attended the same school decades earlier. Your mother doesn't know I'm here, he said, remaining standing despite my gesture toward a chair. I've come to make an offer. I'm listening, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. We're prepared to welcome you back, full reinstatement, executive position, trust fund restored. All we ask is that you reconsider your cooperation with this wasteful investigation. The offer presented as generous reconciliation rather than the desperate bribe it was might once have tempted me. Now it only confirmed how little he understood me. That's not going to happen, I said simply. You're determined to destroy everything I've built. Anger flashed briefly in his eyes. Your own legacy? I'm determined to tell the truth, I corrected. What happens to the company depends on whether it can operate ethically going forward. He studied me for a long moment. You've changed. Yes, I agreed. That's what happens when you have to rebuild your entire life from scratch. Noah thinks you're some kind of hero, he said dismissively. He refuses to see the damage you're causing. Noah is seeing clearly for perhaps the first time I countered. Maybe you should consider why both your children have reached similar conclusions independently. My father moved toward the door, then paused. Your mother asks about you sometimes. When she thinks I don't notice. The statement, likely intended to manipulate my emotions, instead strengthened my resolve. They still saw familial love as a transaction, a tool for achieving compliance. You can tell her I'm doing well, I replied evenly. Better than I ever was trying to be the daughter you wanted, instead of the person I needed to be. After he left, I sat in silence, realizing that the encounter had given me an unexpected gift confirmation that I had truly moved beyond seeking their approval. Their opinion of me, once the driving force of my existence, now held no power. Tomorrow I would testify not out of revenge, but because it was right. The realization brought a peace I hadn't felt in years. The courtroom fell silent. As I was sworn in, my father's steely gaze fixed on me from the defense table across the room. 2 years after being publicly disowned at a family party, I sat before a federal judge to testify about environmental violations that could potentially send my father to prison. Please state your name for the record, requested the federal prosecutor. Callista Jennings, I replied, reclaiming my full name publicly for the first time since the disownment. Not because I sought connection to my family, but because I had finally separated the name from their control. It was mine, now representing my values, not theirs. The evidence was damning. Internal documents revealed systematic environmental violations spanning 15 years, altered test results, hidden contamination reports, intimidation of employees who raised concerns. My testimony provided context connecting executives to decisions, explaining corporate structure, and reporting lines that enabled prosecutors to assign responsibility to specific individuals, including my father. During cross-examination, the defense attorney, my former mentor, attempted to paint me as vindictive, mentally unstable, motivated by rejection. Isn't it true that your cooperation with federal authorities began immediately after your father removed you from the company? He asked. No, I replied calmly. My cooperation began after I discovered evidence of environmental violations that were harming communities. But the timing coincidentally aligns with your personal grievances. The timing aligns with my access to the evidence I corrected, and with my freedom to act according to my conscience without corporate pressure. Throughout the proceedings, I maintained composure, answering questions directly and professionally. Only once did my voice falter when describing discovering cancer clusters in communities downstream from our manufacturing facilities, information the company had deliberately suppressed. From the gallery, I occasionally felt Noah's supportive presence. After completing inpatient treatment and establishing solid sobriety, he had become an addiction counselor, helping others navigate recovery. His public support had cost him his trust fund as well, but he insisted the freedom was worth the financial sacrifice. As I stepped down from the witness stand, my mother's eyes briefly met mine, something unreadable flickering across her perfectly composed face. Throughout the proceedings, she had maintained the role of loyal corporate wife, elegant and impassive, beside my increasingly haggard father. Yet in that momentary connection, I glimpsed something new, perhaps the first hint of doubt about the choices that had cost her both children. The media coverage was extensive. Industry publications focused on stock implications and corporate governance failures. Environmental groups celebrated the case as a landmark accountability moment. Mainstream outlets explored the human drama, the daughter testifying against her powerful father-family loyalty versus ethical responsibility. Pharmaceutical heiress whistleblower revenge or righteousness read one particularly sensationalistic headline, accompanied by side-by-side photos of me at the family party where I was disowned and at the federal courthouse. I declined all interview requests, focusing instead on my growing responsibilities at River Alliance, where I'd been promoted to Legal Affairs Director, a position earned through demonstrated competence rather than family connections. The irony wasn't lost on me. I now held essentially the same title I'd had at Jennings Pharmaceuticals, but this time aligned with my values and achieved on merit. Marcus and I cautiously deepened our reconnection during this period, our relationship evolving into something more mature than our earlier passion. His father's health had deteriorated following his retirement, giving Marcus increased leadership responsibilities at Sinclair Biosolutions. We understood each other's professional pressures and family complications in ways no one else could. We're thinking of dropping the private lawsuit Marcus revealed during a weekend visit to New York. With the federal case proceeding, it feels redundant and possibly even vindictive to continue. I think that's wise, I agreed. This isn't about corporate competition anymore, it's about actual accountability. 6 months after my testimony, the verdict arrived. Jennings Pharmaceuticals, found liable for environmental violations, fined a record $1.2 billion. More significantly, criminal charges against specific executives, including my father, were upheld. Richard Jennings, along with 3 other executives, would face criminal trial for conspiracy and fraud related to environmental reporting. The company's stock plummeted, Board members resigned. Industry analysts predicted either bankruptcy or acquisition by a larger pharmaceutical conglomerate. My father's legacy, the empire he had prioritized above family ethics and human health, was crumbling. Noah called immediately after the verdict. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "I'm processing," I admitted. "It feels complicated." "I know," he said softly. "I'm proud of you, Callie. What you did took incredible courage." "What we both did," I corrected. "Your recovery and speaking out took just as much courage." That evening, I stood on the small balcony of my newest apartment, a modest but comfortable space in a diverse Queens neighborhood I'd grown to love. The sunset painted the skyline in golden hues as I contemplated the journey from privileged, controlled existence to authentic, challenging freedom. My phone rang Aunt Patricia. "Eleanor just called me," she said without preamble. "She wants to meet. Alone without Richard." "What did you tell her?" I asked cautiously. "That it was entirely up to you." Patricia paused. For what it's worth, she sounded different. The family facade is cracking Callista. After careful consideration, I agreed to meet my mother at Patricia's gallery, Neutral Territory, where I felt safe. Eleanor arrived precisely on time, designer handbag and perfect makeup at odds with the hollowness in her eyes. "You look well," she said after an awkward greeting. "I am well," I confirmed. "Better than I was 2 years ago, actually." She nodded stiffly. "Your father is struggling with the charges. His attorneys are recommending a plea deal." "Is that why you wanted to see me, to discuss his legal situation?" "No." Eleanor straightened her already impeccable posture. "I wanted to see you because I've been doing some reflection about the choices I've made, the person I've become." Coming from a woman who had always projected perfect certainty, this admission was seismic. "Your brother sends me recovery literature," she continued with a small, sad smile, "about enabling behaviors, codependency. I thought I was being a good wife, a good mother, by supporting your father's decisions. Now, I wonder if I've been complicit in destruction of communities of our family, perhaps of my own soul. That's quite a realization I managed, unsure how to respond to this unprecedented vulnerability." "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Eleanor clarified. "I don't deserve it yet. I just wanted you to know that I see you now, Callista, the real you, not the daughter I tried to shape, and what I see is someone of remarkable integrity." Tears threatened, but I maintained composure. "Thank you for saying that. Is there any possibility," she asked hesitantly, "that someday we might rebuild some kind of relationship? Perhaps not mother-daughter as before, but something." The question hung between us, complex, loaded with history, yet containing a fragile seed of possibility. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I can't imagine what that would look like right now. But I'm not saying never." It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation, but it was an authentic response, the only kind I was capable of giving now. 3 weeks later, my father accepted a plea deal, significant financial penalties, and a suspended sentence contingent on community service and corporate reform. At the sentencing hearing, I sat in the back row observing rather than participating. As Richard Jennings stood to address the court, our eyes briefly met. The powerful titan who had once declared me dead now appeared diminished, humbled by consequences he had never imagined facing. For the first time in my life, I saw my father as simply a flawed human being rather than an invincible patriarch. "I have lost sight of what truly matters," he admitted to the court. My priorities became distorted over years of pursuing corporate success at any cost. The greatest price I've paid isn't financial or professional, but personal. The loss of relationship with my children who showed more wisdom and courage than I did. Whether his remorse was genuine or strategic remained unclear. But as I left the courthouse that day, I felt the final weight lift from my shoulders. My parents no longer held power over my identity or worth. The cycle was broken. Later that evening, Marcus called with unexpected news. The board is restructuring Sinclair. They've asked me to head a new division focused on environmental remediation, including cleanup of the areas affected by Jennings' operations. That's perfect for you, I said warmly. Your scientific background combined with your ethical focus. There's more, he continued. We're establishing a partnership with River Alliance for community engagement. I specifically requested you as our liaison. The synchronicity felt right, our professional paths converging again, this time on shared ethical ground, rather than forbidden attraction. I think we'd work well together, I replied carefully. With proper professional boundaries, of course. Of course, he agreed, though his tone suggested he hoped those boundaries might eventually soften. We've both come a long way since that family party. Indeed we had. From the devastation of that night when my parents publicly declared me dead to them, a new life had emerged, authentic, purposeful, and entirely my own. The journey had been painful beyond measure, yet I wouldn't trade the person I'd become for the protected but controlled existence I'd left behind. Family, I had learned, wasn't defined by blood or obligation, but by genuine support and mutual respect. My chosen family now included Noah in recovery, Aunt Patricia with her quiet rebellion colleagues who valued my contributions, and perhaps Marcus, our relationship evolving into something healthier than before. Justice had been served not through revenge, but through truth and accountability. The greatest victory wasn't my parents' downfall or the company's penalties, but the reclamation of my authentic self from the wreckage of conditional love. 3 years after being publicly disowned, I stood on a podium accepting an Environmental Advocacy Award for River Alliance's Community Water Monitoring Program. From the audience, Noah applauded wildly, now 2 years sober and running a youth counseling program. Beside him sat Marcus, our rekindled relationship now built on mutual respect and shared values, rather than forbidden attraction. In the aftermath of the Jennings Pharmaceuticals case, I'd been appointed to lead a new environmental compliance division at the restructured company now under new ownership. The position offered a chance to reform from within the very systems I had exposed, a perfect culmination of my journey. Last week, I received a letter from my father, his first direct communication since the sentencing. I recognize too late that my greatest legacy isn't the company, but the children I failed to truly see, he wrote. You showed more integrity in opposing me than I did in building my empire. My mother calls occasionally our relationship tentatively rebuilding on more honest terms. Some wounds may never fully heal, but I found peace in understanding that being declared dead to my parents ultimately gave me the freedom to truly live. Thank you all for following my story. If you've ever had to choose between family expectations and your authentic self, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Sometimes family karma delivers the hardest but most necessary lessons. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe for more real-life family drama stories, and share with someone who might need to hear that. Choosing your integrity is always the right path, even when it's the hardest one. I'm grateful for this community where we can share these difficult life lessons together.